Our next speaker is Brad Adams. Brad is currently working on cancer research at the UCLA Medical Center as project manager for breast and lung cancer studies with Dr. Charles Grobe and Dennis McKenna. Brad Adams.
Good morning. Just going to start my timer here to make sure that stay on track. It's a great honor to be here, and thank you for coming. This is definitely a labor of love, and got some great results from the study, so I'm really excited to share it with you. It's a study I did with Dr. Charles Grobe and Dennis McKenna. First, I want to give a quick couple plugs out for some groups in Los Angeles. We're trying to put LA on the map to try to catch up with New York and San Francisco. Two groups here. One thing that wasn't mentioned in my bio was I started a group called LAMPS, which is the Los Angeles Medicinal Plant Society. We meet on the first Sunday of every month. We have guest speakers. Dennis McKenna's been a speaker. We had a lot of great speakers for this. So if you want to sign up for that, I have a sign-up sheet to come up later, and I can tell you more about it. And also the AWARE project, started by Ashley Booth, which is kind of like a sister organization. Just want to get a shout out to them as well. And also, just to plant a seed, we're preparation for a conference somewhat similar to this in Los Angeles. The target date is February 2018. It will be at USC. So just put that on your calendar, and if anyone's interested in speaking or participating in that, let me know as well. So first I'd like to thank Dr. Charles Grobe and Dennis McKenna. I couldn't find a pithy quote for Charles, so maybe next time, but if you can't read that for Dennis, it says, "No theory of neuroscience and how the brain is related to consciousness will ever be complete if it doesn't take psychedelic phenomenon into account," which is a true statement. And I'd also like to thank Adam Snyder, Dario Nardi, and Matt Baldwin for their help in developing a coding scheme for these data. Adam will be speaking tomorrow, and we'll flesh out a little more of the details in the coding scheme. It's sitting right in front here. So I want to thank them as well. So I'm not going to go too much in detail about what is ayahuasca. I'm assuming that if you're here, then you know what it is. But if there's one or two of you out there who doesn't know what it is, in a nutshell, it's an admixture of two plants that are boiled for a long time, and it makes a very delicious tea that sometimes delicious. But that's all I'll say about that. So, the brief overview, there's a growing body of evidence showing that ayahuasca may help alleviate certain psychiatric problems like depression, addictions, PTSD, etc. But longitudinal data is sparse. I see there's things on the horizon where they're trying to fill this gap and follow people for longer periods of time to see what the length of remission of these symptoms is. But I think that's one of the big strengths of the studies. We followed people for 6 months, and I'll show the results of that. So to date, no studies could be found that examine changes in existential values, and so we added an existential measure to the study. And ayahuasca is legal in Peru and it's considered part of their national heritage. So instead of waiting for 10 years or so to try to get a study done here, we decided to do it in Peru, where it's already legal. So study set up, a total of 52 participants already committed to a 10-day ayahuasca retreat in the Sacred Valley of Peru. There were 3 separate retreats, so we just aggregated the data into one big sample pool. The SCL90, which is a broad swath of psychiatric symptoms, was used, as well as the LAP-R, Life Attitudes Profile revised. And that is the existential measure. And I'll go into more details of that further on. So we got measures before and after the retreat, as well as 3 and 6 months post. So we have 4 time points. Questions at the end, please. Thank you. Out of the 52 participants, 29 filled out questionnaires at every time point. There were roughly twice as many men as women. The median age was 45, ranged from 20 to 69, so it's slightly skewed to the older age range. Predominantly a Caucasian, 50 Caucasian, 1 Asian, 1 black, so there's that bias there that should be addressed. We also asked how many psychedelic experiences people had. We want to know how experienced this group was. So the average number of psychedelic experiences was 29. The range was 0 to 200. And as you can see, 9 were psychedelic naive, meaning they've never taken a psychedelic. So this was the first foray into the field. So 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, I think, is pretty bold. And 32, for the number of ayahuasca experiences, the average was 3, and the range was 0 to 49, and 32 of them were ayahuasca naive. So first, look at the medical. So we asked people, what brings you here? What issues are you trying to, hoping to get help with? And here's the breakdown. As you can see, 45%, which is the largest category, said none. So most of these people weren't there to seek any physical help or with medical issues. But for those that were expecting that, 30% mentioned specific body parts, pain in the legs, back pain, so forth. Specific medical conditions, asthma or something of that nature, or general whole body, like whole body pains, fatigue, and so forth. And 6% mentioned something other. Then we asked, what sort of psychological issues are you hoping to address? And as you can see, anxiety and fear was the largest category, with 23% saying they were hoping for help in that area. The next largest category was none, followed by addiction, depression, other, emotional improvement, part of that being healing of guilt, shame, and anger. 3% wanted help with trauma or PTSD, 2% with self-concept improvement, 2% with grief or loss issues, 2% stress, and then the rest were increased self-esteem or confidence, cognitive improvement, such as improvement in thinking and memory, or spirituality, ego transcendence. And then we had just asked in general, well, what are your intentions for coming here? And so we kind of narrowed it down to these basic categories. And as you can see, learning was the top one. So most people came to learn something about either like a spiritual learning, transpersonal type of learning, or a psychological type of learning, learn more about themselves, or social. And also 29% came for growth along those same dimensions, spiritual, psychological, and social. Healing, 23% came for healing, and 13% came for connection. And again, the connection could be a connection to spirit, connection to a transpersonal realm of being, God, or whatever you want to call it, Gaia, and 4% other. So the setting was in the Central Valley, Sacred Valley of Peru. My office was right over here, next to Dennis's. Now, the reason I show this slide is to show that there's a lot of confounds to this type of research. Is it due to the brew? Is it due to the shaman? Is it due to the Icaros? Is it due to the fact that you're in Peru? If you haven't been to Peru, it's a wonderful place, and that in itself can sort of lift depression symptoms. So just keep that in mind when you see these data. So the measures, real briefly, the SEL90, again, is a broad range of psychological problems, including depression, anxiety, hostility. The LAP-R is a multidimensional measure designed to assess the degree of existential meaning and purpose in life and the strength and motivation to find meaning and purpose. Some of the factors on that are purpose, coherence, and death acceptance. And I should mention briefly that this is based on the work of Viktor Frankl that developed this measure. It's a pretty interesting measure. And we had additional items based on asking about past psychedelic experiences, I already showed you, and intentions. And then we asked that what did they gain from the ceremonies? And we asked that at the post time point after all 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, then at 3 months and 6 months later. So I'm excited to show you those data. So let me get into the post-treatment retreat results. So for the 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, we asked how intense was the experience? And as you can see, the range is from 1 to 10. Some people, I can imagine someone saying 1, but maybe they're from a different cohort where they got different medicine or something. But the average was almost 8. So most people thought it was a pretty intense experience, and the medicine was very strong. How scary was the experience? Again, the range 1 to 10. The average was about 5. So you had a whole range of types of experience. Some people had what they called pretty terrifying experiences. Most people had very positive experiences, but there's a whole range of answers there. And to what degree were your goals met? And that was almost an 8 out of the 1 to 10 scale. And again, we have a 1 to 10 range for that one. So here are the results for the psychiatric measures. And one thing, as you can see, first of all, there's a pretty common pattern here. And just really quickly, going from left to right, this is the pretest at baseline before any ayahuasca was administered. This is the post-test, right after or shortly after the last ayahuasca ceremony. This is the 3-month time point and the 6-month time point. And the good news that we found here was that not only were these early gains maintained, but they were actually accelerated and improved over the 3-month period and the 6-month period. So that was a very good finding that it's not just a flash in the pan. This isn't something where people go out feeling great, and then if they were depressed, they'll slowly go back to it. It seemed to maintain, which was very good news. And some of these drops are pretty dramatic. You look at this is somatic complaints, manifestations of stress or psychiatric distress through the body in terms of pain and so forth. OCD, I don't need to explain, obsessive-compulsive symptoms. And here you can see the huge drop-off that maintained. This is interpersonal sensitivity, which is important, and I should probably read that if I had that here, which I don't. But it's feeling inferior in terms of comparing yourself to other people. So you're very sensitive to criticism. You just feel like you're not as good as others and so forth. And I was really excited to see this big drop-off there. I mean, that was a huge drop-off that maintained. And depression, which is in the description of this talk, you all know, is a 42% drop at the 6-month time point, which is very exciting. And again, this is a group of pretty healthy, high-functioning people. So this wasn't a group of people who were depressed or had treatment-resistant depression where they already had a high level. These people, the average level of depression was somewhere in the middle. So this is a pretty big drop-off for that particular group. Anxiety, you see the drop-off there, somewhat similar to depression, not quite as dramatic. Hostility, phobic anxiety, paranoid ideation, psychosis, and additional items. And I show this again, just showing this is the pretest and 6-month follow-up, just so you can see the net gain over the 6-month time. And here you can see that the huge 42% drop-off in depression. I don't know what this drop-off is, but it's more than 50%. So these pretty substantial gains for this little pilot research. Now, the Global Symptom Index is done by adding all those psychiatric symptoms together. So this is the best single measure of how distressed a person is psychologically or in a psychiatric mode. So it's you can see highly significant, the 0.001 level. And it shows the typical staircase pattern here of the drop-off from baseline to post, then even the larger drop-off at 3-month follow-up, which was maintained at the 6-month follow-up. And again, here is the before and after, just in terms of pre-test and 6-month follow-up. Now, the existential measures weren't quite as dramatic, but the good news is they were all in the perceived or the predicted and hoped for direction. This is purpose in life. To what degree do you feel like you're here for a purpose? You have a sense of meaning in your life. Sense of cohesion, your life seems to make sense from past, present to future. There's a coherent story. Choice, responsibility, which I won't go too much into, but it kind of explains itself. This is death acceptance, or which also incorporates fear of death. So this increase here shows actually a decrease in fear of death or increase in the acceptance of the fact of death, which I was really excited to see this increase here, because how many things do you know that can do this besides entheogens, and in this case, ayahuasca in particular. So this is very exciting, even though it wasn't significant. I think this is something worthy of a better look. Oh. Existential vacuum, this is a sense of feeling of emptiness, and there's a slight drop off here. I was hoping to see more there, but it does go in the expected direction across time. And goal seeking, which didn't get too much in terms of that one. And again, here are the pre and post. The death acceptance, just from pre-test to 6-month follow-up, was 0.04, which, since the omnibus test wasn't significant, we really shouldn't use this, but I just want to show that there is something that deserves a further look. Now, this shows the global symptoms. These are the same scores that I showed before. This is the overall, what's the best single measure of distress. And these are all the people that completed all the 6-month follow-up. And as you can see, there's only 3 people who had increases here, which and all these increases are very, very minor. They're like 6 points or something. So almost negligible. This person had a slightly larger one, and she mentioned a lot of things going on in her life that had nothing to do with the ayahuasca or whatever. So that would just have an artifact there. But as you see, the trend is to go down over the 6-month period, which is another exciting finding. This is one of the measures for the existential. They kind of took all of the measures into account to come up with a global measure. And the existential transcendence measure, which is this one, which is the one I'll talk about, takes into account both the degree to which meaning and purpose have been discovered and the motivation to find meaning and purpose. New perspective on life, has internalized successes, risen above the failures of living, has a good understanding of self, has come to accept the prospect of personal death, has an appreciation for the past, present, and future, and views life as inevitable and meaningful. So this is like an existential rock star measure. So the higher you are in here, the more you've integrated a lot of your existential issues and come to grips with the fact that you're inhabiting a mortal vehicle, and you come to grips with that. And again, here's the pre and post test. I'm sorry, the pre-test and 6-month follow-up. So I'm going to talk about a few negative experiences. Some people had some negative experiences. I think it's important to also highlight these to see what happens. Because some people might come out of this with having a very hard experience. This person in particular was a 45-year-old female who never took any psychedelic in the past. So this is a person new to any psychedelic, as well as ayahuasca. She skipped the last ceremony, and in just a historical interest, during the second ceremony, there was a very scary event that happened. Someone was having a very strong reaction that was hard to ignore. And some people dropped out, I think, that partly due to that. But so this person, you can see, this is a GSI score from pre-test to post. So you can see it skyrocket from about 140 to 180. So she really had a hard time at her post-test measure. And I was a little concerned about her. I kept in contact with her through email, trying to help her as best I could. We didn't have anything built into the study to do this, but I was concerned about her. So we asked her post experience, what was your experience with ayahuasca? She said, terrible. What have you gained? I don't know yet. Then the 3-month follow-up, what have you gained? I'm less stressed, and here you see the huge drop-off here in her psychiatric scores here. I'm less stressed and feel I will get answers in the future. Her comment was, I'm still a bit confused with my experience, but believe it was profound and that I am pushed forward, which is good. So feeling a little more hopeful. She had a little bit of a remission here, but which still a net loss in terms of the symptoms at 6 months. What have you gained? I realize I know nothing, but must be grateful for my experience and that I must change my perceptions about life. So the next one was a 48-year-old female who took a psychedelic twice in the past, but never ayahuasca. She skipped the last ceremony. And real briefly, this is a person who was even reticent to be in the study. She said, oh, I just had this big breakthrough, and I'm feeling great. I don't know if I'm going to skew the data. I said, well, no, whatever is found is found. That's, it's the truth, and you should still take part. She had a really hard time with the experience. And as you can see, that it's skyrocketed from about maybe 5 or so up to 100. So huge, huge spike in her distress symptoms. So at posts right after the last ayahuasca session, what was your experience? She said it was a mistake. What have you gained? Confidence in myself and the fact that ayahuasca isn't something I would benefit from at this point in my life. Luckily, and if we stopped there, this would look like just a negative finding, and this would be what we concluded. But luckily, we kept going, and at the 3-month follow-up, you could see it even went down below her baseline. So she had a huge drop here. And what have you gained? Great friends, better understanding of why people choose psychedelics. And at the 6-month follow-up, she said, what have you gained? New friends, insight into the reason people seek psychedelic experiences, confident in my own path. So it didn't sound like she was sold on ayahuasca as being like, oh, this is the great thing and everyone should do it. Yet she was no worse for wear, and she learned, sounds like she learned something and made some great friends. So the next person, this is a 62-year-old male who took a psychedelic once in the past, but never ayahuasca. And I should mention this person came with a lot of severe physical limitations, pretty severe neurological disease, and he was on a lot of assisted devices. So he wasn't expecting a miracle cure, but he did kind of have hopes to see what he could get in terms of this. So the post-experience was nothing happened other than diarrhea and some nausea. What have you gained? Far more skepticism. Comments. Although I went in with low expectations, I also went in with high hopes, and it ended up quite disappointed. And we were all disappointed in the cohort. Everyone wanted to see some sort of improvement here. So it was a disappointment for the whole group. And we're all pulling for him to get some improvement, which didn't happen. 3-month follow-up. Oops, sorry. And as you can see, it just, pretty much this is negligible changes. I mean, not significant, but 3-month follow-up, what have you gained? A greater awareness of people's proclivity for escapism. And 6-month follow-up, what have you gained? Nothing really. Comments, it was good that I went, even though for me it was a bust. So for him, he essentially got nothing out of the ayahuasca experience. I think he enjoyed being there at the beautiful resort and meeting some people, but it was a bit disappointing. Last one here, this is the person that had the very severe reaction during the second ceremony, very cathartic reaction. 42-year-old male who took a psychedelic 5 times in the past, including ayahuasca 3 times. He dropped after a rough second session. So we only got the post data from him. What was your experience with ayahuasca? It was just disturbing. What have you gained? Not sure. What are your comments? Ayahuasca needs more safety measures. But as you can see, even though he had this rough experience, he didn't have a significant change in these psychiatric symptoms. So we saw him the next day, and you couldn't tell that he went through this just by looking at him. So, which is the good news. It's a shame he didn't stay in there so we could see if there's any changes in what happened. But at least it's good news that he didn't have a huge increase during the post. So I wanted to see what accounts for this. Why do some people have these negative experiences at post, regardless of what happens further down? So one thing we found is that most of the people who had negative experiences are people who are naive or pretty much newbies to taking these compounds. As you can see here, with any psychedelic, people who took the highest amount, 11 to 100, they were all positive experiences. Nobody had a negative experience. 1 to 10, it was, it's kind of splits. There were some negative experiences in this group, and even for people who are psychedelically naive, this is the layout. Most people had positive, but there were a couple who had negative. Now for ayahuasca, you see there's only one person who had, whoever took it, who had the negative experience. That was the person who dropped out after the second session. But so it seems like people who, for the first time are taking it, are more susceptible to maybe having a trying experience, which sort of makes sense. This is a very different type of experience. It can be very disconcerting to let go of your ego if you're very attached to it and don't know how to navigate those spaces. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, and one thing that also pushes towards the fact that a little training before these sessions and how to navigate these spaces might be helpful, as well as the post-care with the integration as well. I'm not sure how much time I have. I didn't want to leave it all on the negative experience, so this is one of the positive experiences at post. I won't read all this, but I just want to put this is someone who is only 24 years old, had 20 psychedelic experiences, but none with ayahuasca. He self-diagnosed himself as non-diagnosed minor anxiety and depression. So what was your experience with ayahuasca? My experience was full spectrum. I had some of the most beautiful and most terrifying moments of my life. I experienced death, got to choose to come back to life, was shown many of my shadows. I got to see my relationship from a third-point perspective and see where I can make improvements. I have found a passion for my mission in life. I want to help save the world. I always trusted Wyra, the shaman, with the amount of medicine to take. I couldn't keep it down that long, but luckily it was long enough to receive the lessons. I wish there was more of a connection to the outdoors, but it was nice to know there was somewhat of a warm in that space, as I had many warm and cold spells during the night. It was beyond words in a sense. So you can see there's a lot of mystical experience components here. At points I didn't know if I was going to come back and had to fully let go of control. At one point my hands forced my eyes open as a colony of ants ran at my face, and when I looked up, my hands were dancing like snakes to Wyra's Icaro, beyond my control. It was quite a strange experience, and I felt scared for a few moments as I went down the road of, am I possessed? I just kept on accepting all I could and kept surrendering my desire to control. Then what have you gained? This is too big of a question to fully answer. gratitude, compassion, love, a new sense of self-encompassing all of existence, losing Frank, not his real name, as a central role, instead dedicating my life to the plants, the earth, nature, animals, and healing. I've gained a larger scope of life, insight into my purpose, relationships, desires, goals, my shadow. And I won't read this whole list of long, wonderful things he mentioned here.
Peter, you're on the red light.
Oh, I'm in the red light. Oh, okay. So,
But we're ahead.
okay, I'll wrap up really quickly here. So this is showing post 3-month and 6-month follow-up in terms of, we asked them questions about their experience. So I can see learning was consistently pretty high, the highest category. Learning about self, the universe, the world, and others. The next one was healing, improvement, functioning. The next was appreciation and gratitude. Gratitude for the ayahuasca, the shaman, the group setting. Difficult, challenging experiences. Again, this is difficult positive and difficult negative experiences, which I went over. Connection. This is connection to self, others, and God. And then a couple people mentioned the entertaining value, just the lights and so forth. So in summary, many measures of psychiatric distress went down significantly after 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, and the gains were not only retained over time, they were increased up to 6 months. Depression scores went down by 43% by the 6-month mark. Existential measures went up in the expected direction. Negative experiences tend to remit over time. The caveats was it's a very small group. So on the spectrum of control and the gold standard for research, this is on the low end. We had no control over it. A lot of confounding variables. Ayahuasca may have potential as a treatment for many psychiatric ailments, including depression. Given the significant decrease in fear of death, further research is warranted in this area, especially with terminally ill patients. There's a need to better understand essential safety parameters. Research does not have to be expensive. We did this very cheaply. So anyone who wants to go out and do this kind of research, be creative and just kind of go out and see what you can drum up. And here's some of the pictures. That's a shaman, a beautiful resort. And this is kind of a Wordle map that we did just to show what the most common words that came up as people were giving their experiences. And as you can see, life and experience come up. And as anyone has ever taken ayahuasca or any psychedelic can attest to, it's an experience. You know, it's a very powerful experience. It can change your life and in all these wonderful ways. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for going over.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take questions.
Yeah. Anyone has questions, you can ask me later.